Content discussed in this audio might not be suitable for everyone. This deep dive focuses on extremely sensitive, unfiltered personal disclosures and adult themes. You are the deep dive, powered by NeonKore Media. Welcome to the Internet's Underground.
Yeah.
We are dropping all the pretense today because we are looking directly at the raw, unfiltered shadow self. The part that, only comes out when the mask is firmly on.
Yeah.
We are diving into the secrets that people wouldn't even tell their therapist.
It's the kind of material that absolutely requires the total safety net of anonymity. Because if these truths ever escaped into the identifiable world, they'd shatter relationships, careers, reputations.
Everything.
Anonymity is the ultimate protection for the ultimate transgression.
Exactly. And before we get into the academic frameworks and all that, I want to set the tone with a piece of source material that completely blew our minds. I need your immediate, visceral, unfiltered reaction.
Okay.
To something pulled straight from the confession stack. No pause, just a gut response.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. I have a feeling I should be clenching my jaw right now, though.
Okay, so picture this. This is pulled directly from a detailed narrative we analyzed.
Mm-hmm.
You and your partner are hosting your two closest friends, Jim and Rena. They're a couple, newly engaged after knowing each other for decades.
Mm-hmm. They
fly down to the Fort Lauderdale to visit you. It's late, you're all chilling outside under the warm Florida moon, drinking some expensive Bollinger champagne. The vibe is it's pure, deep, lifelong friendship. You feel totally content.
Right, a perfect evening.
Perfect. You toss a pebble at Jim to break up some intense kissing. They laugh. And you decide to head inside to bed.
Yeah.
But you can't sleep, so you look out the window. And Rena, who's 62 and incredibly fit.
Okay.
She gets down on her knees and starts performing oral sex on Jim. Right there on the patio chair under the stars.
Yeah.
So you rush out naked, just utterly consumed by curiosity and desire, ready to join.
Wow.
And Jim just smiles, winks at you, and says, about time you came out here.
Yeah.
What is your first immediate thought, and why do you think a fantasy like this is so compelling to so many people?
My first immediate thought is just absolute shock, but not shock that they're doing it. It's shock that they're doing it there.
Yeah.
Right outside the window of their lifelong friends. That blend of total inhibition and public exposure, it's electric. You are suddenly seeing the raw, honest, non-socially polite version of people you thought you knew intimately.
The mask is off.
The mask is completely off. And I'm not going to lie, part of me is completely envious of that. That radical level of freedom and lack of inhibition.
Uh-huh.
The raw internal reaction is pure primal curiosity mixed with, how do I participate in this level of authenticity?
Yeah.
I remember a time I almost went through with a highly questionable setup at a convention. Nothing explicit, but right on the edge of destroying an important boundary. And it was all driven by the sheer novelty and the feeling that, for one night, I could be absolutely someone else. That need to push the boundary, to discover the hidden sexuality of respected friends. That's the power of the digital double life in action, right there.
That is the tension we are tackling today. That story where the narrator, Tim, ends up being completely sexually subjugated by his long-term friends, that is the ultimate expression of a hidden self. And this stack of sources we have.
It's massive.
It is. From serious academic papers analyzing anonymity and personality to viral Reddit relationship drama and, explicit erotica, it's all about that line.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission today is to unpack the digital double life. Why do we save our deepest, darkest, or most shameful secrets for anonymous strangers? What does this desire for radical self-expression and sometimes outright toxicity reveal about human nature when the mask is securely fastened?
We're cutting through all the noise to find the fundamental human needs driving this behavior.
Let's unpack this.
So, to really understand any of this source material, we have to start with the academic foundation. And that's the anonymity freedom framework, which it works within the larger online disinhibition effect.
Right, disinhibition.
The core idea is actually really simple. Anonymity online frees people from the suffocating expectations and judgment of their identifiable social spheres.
Which makes perfect sense. If I have a career, a mortgage, a reputation to maintain, the cost of saying something radical or expressing some taboo desire is enormous.
Of course.
Anonymity functionally reduces that cost to zero. The thicker the mask I have to wear in real life, the more pressure builds up underneath it for some kind of release.
Precisely. And the disinhibition effect has two flavors. There's benign disinhibition, which is what facilitates honest self-disclosure and emotional sharing.
The good stuff.
The good stuff. And then there's toxic disinhibition, which facilitates aggressive or malevolent behavior. But what's fascinating is what the benign side enables. The research shows that sharing personal, unknown information is strongly linked to feelings of momentary connectedness, social support, and even a temporary lift in life satisfaction.
So it feels good.
It feels good. That initial disclosure provides a needed psychological release.
So even admitting something shameful, like that story we found about the childhood plagiarism that haunted
Oh.
someone for 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
just saying it makes you feel better because you've finally shared that heavy load. That's the therapeutic angle, right? The off-my-chest part.
It is, but here is the critical paradox the research highlights, and this is something we really need to dwell on. They found that the frequency of posting official confessions, the constant reliance on these huge anonymous subreddits, is positively related to loneliness and narcissism. And conversely, it is negatively related to actual long-term social connectedness.
Wait a minute. That runs completely counter to why people are doing it in the first place.
Yeah.
They confess to feel connected, but the more they do it, the lonelier and more narcissistic they become.
Yeah.
How does that mechanism even work?
It speaks to the difference between, let's say, structural connection and fleeting validation. Real, identifiable connection is messy. It requires vulnerability, it takes time, and it demands compromise.
Hard work.
It's hard work. Anonymous confession, however, offers an immediate, low-effort dopamine hit of validation. You dump your trauma, strangers assure you that you're right and your parents are wrong, and you feel temporarily relieved.
It's emotional sugar. It provides immediate energy, but no lasting nutritional value.
That is the perfect analogy. And the more you rely on that sugar high, the less equipped you are to handle the difficult labor of genuine connection. The reliance on the echo chamber just reinforces the behavior. You feel lonely, so you confess, you get temporary relief, but you haven't solved the underlying lack of real social support.
And the narcissism part.
The narcissism likely stems from the fact that you're engaging in a very transactional form of self-centered disclosure. You expect immediate, non-challenging affirmation. It's all about you.
Okay, so let's break down the two specific motivations that drive this behavior. The sources measured this using something called the Online Anonymity Questionnaire, the OAQ, and they found anonymous self-expression and anonymous toxicity.
Right, and these are basically the benign versus the malign sides of the mask. Anonymous self-expression is the constructive therapeutic drive. It's the motivation to disclose true, intimate information, to experiment with self-presentation, or to connect with people you wouldn't normally encounter. The survey respondents said things like, they can be somebody else when I'm anonymous, or they can connect with people they normally wouldn't in the offline world. It's about seeking authenticity or experimentation.
And anonymous toxicity is just purely the destructive drive. It's the motivation to behave poorly without consequence, what we would typically call trolling or cyberbullying.
Exactly. Toxicity includes statements like, I get satisfaction from aggravating people anonymously online, or I am more likely to do things that are unlawful or illegal when I'm anonymous. This is about exercising power, provoking a reaction, and just completely avoiding accountability for the harm you inflict.
But the key academic insight here, the one that tells us the most about the digital double life, is that these two motives are not mutually exclusive. They're not separate camps of people.
Absolutely not. They are positively correlated. The same person who desperately wants to express their true self and find connection might also harbor a desire to tear others down from the shadows. The underlying psychological structure that requires the mask is what connects them.
And that structure is defined by two major traits: low self-concept clarity and high Machiavellianism. Let's start with self-concept clarity. For you listening, what are the mechanisms that link a lack of self-definition to needing this kind of anonymity?
Well, low self-concept clarity means the individual lacks a firm, stable understanding of their own internal traits, their goals, their values. They're psychologically malleable.
So they don't really know who they are.
Exactly. And anonymity becomes this risk-free environment, a behavioral sandbox where they can try on different identities without the consequence of committing to them in real life. They can be the confident expert one day, the sensitive trauma victim the next. The desire for self-expression is often an attempt to solve this lack of clarity.
But then, how does that lack of clarity connect to high Machiavellianism, the willingness to manipulate and exploit other people? That seems like a leap.
It is, but it makes sense. Machiavellianism thrives on low self-concept clarity because it means the person is primarily focused on their own needs and goals, and they see others as tools to achieve those ends. If you don't have a stable ethical framework, if you don't know who you are, it's much, much easier to justify manipulating others.
Right.
And on the internet, that manipulation manifests as toxicity. You exploit others' emotional reactions, their outrage, their pain, for your own satisfaction or attention.
This helps us filter out the personalities a bit. The toxic motives, specifically, are where we find the dark triad correlations, right?
Correct. When you isolate anonymous toxicity, it is strongly and consistently associated with classic dark traits like psychopathy, which is lack of empathy, impulsivity, and sadism, which is deriving pleasure from inflicting pain. This confirms it's not just a frustration release, it's a deliberate search for gratification through antagonism.
But the self-expression crowd, the confession posters, the people sharing their deepest shame, they're often driven by traits that are less malign, aren't they?
Absolutely. The self-expression motives are associated with low self-esteem and high social anxiety. They're people who feel genuinely paralyzed by real-world social expectations and feel unsafe being authentic in identifiable spaces. Anonymity grants them a temporary, precious freedom of self-presentation.
So the deep dive insight here is that the digital double life isn't just populated by cynical psychopathic trolls in a basement somewhere.
Not at all.
It's equally populated by people who are too anxious, too lacking in self-esteem, or just too poorly defined in their real life to be their true self. They are seeking validation, or they're desperately experimenting with who they might be, and the mask is really the only tool they have.
Right, it's the necessary refuge for the socially anxious. But again, we have to return to that paradox, that immediate relief comes at the cost of fostering long-term loneliness.
Okay, so if the first section covered the internal psychological drivers for anonymity, let's move now to what the mask allows us to get away with socially. This brings us to section 2, the social media drama industrial complex. This is where anonymous self-expression collides with relationship turmoil and demands a verdict.
And this section really reveals how the impulse for immediate, simplistic self-expression has fundamentally warped the nature of public advice. The anonymous context just favors outrage over nuance.
I noticed this trend immediately in the relationship advice forums we reviewed. The traditional lore that advice should center on communication and compromise is dead. It is gone. The advice has massively shifted toward immediate, hardline solutions.
The statistics are clear on this. Comments advising boundaries, therapy, and immediate breakups have surged, completely dominating the upvoted content. The data shows that advising people to walk away or cut contact is now the overwhelming default popular tip in these relationship subreddits.
And it creates a culture where even the smallest transgression, a dirty dish, a minor annoyance, can be instantly escalated to a referendum on the partner's entire moral character.
Yeah.
If I say, my partner missed my birthday, the top comment will be, lawyer up, they're financially abusing you.
It's the reality television syndrome, just writ large. These anonymous forums operate like courtrooms demanding clear heroes, clear villains, and a satisfying, easy, unambiguous verdict.
Right.
Nuance and shades of gray are avoided because they don't produce the desired emotional feedback loop. They don't farm engagement, as they say. As one source noted, the stories are filled with ridiculous stakes, invoking a mix of jokes and actual serious breakup advice.
Let's look at some of these case studies that went viral because they just showcase the digital audience's appetite for a definitive scorched earth resolution, starting with the AI vows disaster.
Oh, this one. This is a perfect example of a failure of emotional labor compounded by technology. So you have a 35-year-old man who used ChatGPT to write his wedding vows. Despite his 34-year-old partner having an explicit stated disdain for AI in creative contexts, he thought the AI vows would be well-written and expressive and thus more special.
The arrogance is just. It's incredible. He decided his judgment was superior to his partner's stated emotional needs on their wedding day. And of course, she knew instantly.
She knew. The immediate recognition of that robotic, generic language by the partner led to her walking out publicly after whispering, "Did you use fucking AI to write that?"
But the real insight comes from the aftermath, which played out anonymously online. After being universally condemned, the man tried to salvage the situation. His attempt at genuine reconciliation or repair after that level of public humiliation, he brought her snacks and flowers.
Snacks and flowers.
Snacks and flowers. That gesture, analyzed online, exposed his complete emotional incomprehension. The top comment called him fucking clueless, pointing out that he thought a major, public, deeply personal betrayal could be fixed by a visit to a convenience store.
It highlights the gulf between expressing emotion and performing emotional labor. He offloaded the authenticity to a machine, and when his partner demanded genuine effort, he offered trivial performative comfort. He failed the relationship test, and the anonymous audience who crave authenticity issued the verdict. Wedding off, he was left to process the humiliation alone.
Then we have the high-drama entitlement in the entitled friend case. Liza, 26, she has 3 kids, and she decided her sister's child-free brother, Philip, who's 33, was obligated to date her.
This story is all about entitlement crossing the line into character assassination. When Philip politely declined Liza's advances, she immediately escalated, declaring that if an adult man doesn't like adult women, there's only 2 other options.
Wow. So she slandered him, suggesting he must be gay or a pedo, simply because he rejected her and wasn't interested in taking on her 3 children.
And when the original poster intervened and stated the obvious, that dating Liza means Philip becomes an immediate dad, Liza's true motivation just burst out. She yelled back that Philip, at 33, needs some damn responsibility.
Oh, no.
She views her children not as human beings he needs to love, but as a corrective measure, a responsibility he is obligated to take on to fix his unacceptable child-free life.
And the anonymous forum's verdict here is crucial, I think. It's a collective condemnation of entitlement, which the internet just loves to dismantle. They validate Philip's boundaries and condemn Liza's attempt to manipulate his life.
Absolutely.
For our final dramatic masterpiece in this category, let's look at the systemic boundary erosion in the mother-in-law takeover. Pure AITA gold.
Oh, this one is a classic. It involves a 6-year-old princess party. The wife, she's 33, told her mother-in-law the party starts at 2 p.m. The MIL and her contingent, her sister and aunt, show up at 11 a.m. because the MIL insisted she needed to help.
But they didn't help. They took over.
Yeah.
They changed the tablecloth, moved all the decorations because the wife's choices were too childish, and then they delivered the ultimate insult.
The cake.
The sister brought out a second cake, larger than the original, that said, "Happy birthday from Grandma."
That second cake is a symbolic act of erasure. It is a theatrical statement saying, your authority as the mother and host is completely irrelevant. The MIL just negated the wife's role entirely.
And when the wife, understandably in tears, begged her husband to intervene, his classic conflict avoidance kicked in.
Yeah.
He just said, "Just let them help, it's fine."
Ugh.
That passive response from the husband is the final ingredient for the anonymous outraged machine. The wife loses it, tells them all to leave, which results in the MIL crying and the sister calling the wife a bitch.
Yeah.
This story exploded because it resonates with the deep, real-world pain of boundary erosion and having a partner who refuses to protect you.
And we have to remember that the dynamics of these viral stories are often worsened by manufactured content designed purely to farm engagement.
Right, the fake stuff.
The sources highlight fake posts, like the poorly written narrative about the husband who threatens divorce to scare his wife into shutting up, or the cited fictional fiancé who is the kindest, most amazing guy, but also breaks wrists when angry. The format demands escalating, unbelievable stakes for attention and the resultant performance of righteous condemnation.
It speaks to the toxicity motive we discussed earlier. The audience craves the easy villain, the easy sentence, and the immediate, satisfying verdict. Dump him and call the cops. The mask gives them permission to be judge, jury, and executioner, avoiding the messy, time-consuming labor of communication.
The anonymous mask is just far easier to wear than the complex, nuanced face required for a healthy, functioning relationship, and the audience rewards that simplicity every time.
So if the drama industrial complex is about performing judgment, let's transition now to profound private shame. Let's go deeper into the secrets that require the total unbreachable protection of anonymity.
Confession spaces, like Sir Confession or Off My Chest, they function as venues for what researchers call angst-alleviating therapeutic confession. These are places to acknowledge guilt, break silence on shameful secrets, and deal with decades of silence.
The sheer range of secrets is it's astonishing. They go from childhood mischief that spiraled out of control to massive, life-altering crimes.
Look at the transgressions cited in the sources. We have the poster who admitted to petty revenge, burning her sister's jeans with a hair straightener in 2005 and blaming her dad. A small but, a lingering betrayal.
Sure.
But then you have an environmental catastrophe. The person who confessed, when I was 9, I started the biggest fire my town had seen in 150 years because she and her cousin were setting fire to bushes and were too scared of their parents to call emergency services.
That escalated quickly. From a bad joke to a massive public danger, let's focus on the criminal and ethical dilemmas people choose to confess to total strangers.
Okay, so we saw the confession of organized long-term theft. It was driven by desperation initially, but sustained by habit. The poster who confessed to constantly stealing up to $10,000 in groceries per year in a large city.
$10,000. That isn't just shoplifting a candy bar. That is an industrialized system of petty crime.
It is. The confession details the methods. using reusable bags to hide expensive items like meats, sundries, toilet paper, or leveraging the poor monitoring of self-checkout stations. The psychological burden here is that the theft continued long after their financial situation eased up. It became a deep-seated habit and justification, and the anonymous confession is the only venue where they can publicly process that guilt and justify their necessity-turned greed.
Then there's the guilt that lasts for decades. The story of the fourth grader who copied David McCord's poem, "This Is My Rock," for a contest.
The profound, decades-long trauma here is palpable. The child copied the poem, won first prize, and then lived in constant fear of exposure. This shame was so intense that years later, when she learned about plagiarism, she tore the page out of the encyclopedia that contained the poem, ripped it up, and hid the pieces, wrapped in an unused sanitary napkin.
Wow.
That detail speaks volumes about the absolute necessity of concealment and the sheer terror of discovery. The emotional energy invested in hiding a fourth-grade transgression lasted 20 years.
But the act that truly speaks to the consequences of anonymous spite is the intentional sabotage of the sister-in-law.
Right. The poster admitted that years ago, before her brother married his current wife, the poster gave a soft, negative impression to a hiring manager, a past coworker, specifically to ensure her sister-in-law, who was then just her brother's girlfriend, didn't get her dream job.
And why did she do it?
She did this because the sister-in-law was apparently cruel and judgmental at the time.
So she thought she was delivering a minor correction, a small act of revenge. But the consequence was that the sister-in-law was crushed, her career trajectory changed entirely, and she never recovered that specific opportunity. The guilt is immense because the original grievance has faded, but the consequence remains permanent and completely unknown to the victim.
The poster is living a lie within her own family.
And that hidden knowledge that you fundamentally changed another person's destiny, that is the definition of a heavy secret that requires total anonymity to express, because revealing it would detonate her family.
Absolutely.
Let's shift now to the profound family trauma posts, where anonymity is the only safe space to articulate emotional rupture and betrayal.
The narratives of betrayal in these sources are deeply distressing. There's the case of the 17-year-old female who detailed multiple instances of inappropriate physical touch and exposure by male cousins and her own younger brother. She described how she simply freezed and then removed the evidence herself, the photo her brother took of her, because she understood the toxic, denial-filled dynamics of her family.
So she prioritized removing the evidence over confronting the perpetrator. Why?
Because she knew that in her family structure, the burden of proof would fall on her, and without it, she'd be called a liar or an attention seeker. That speaks volumes about the feeling of abandonment and the structural bias against the victim in toxic family settings.
And we see that emotional neglect mirrored in the story of the 17-year-old affair baby. He saw his father only one day a month. The fragility of that relationship was highlighted when the father's wife insulted the teen, saying he was quite well read for a waitress's son. And his father remained completely silent. That stinging silence was the real betrayal.
And then when the teen came out as gay, the father suggested he might be just confused and should try dating a girl. The consistent lack of protection or affirmation from the father created profound emotional distance, leading the teen to use anonymous platforms as his only form of validation.
Finally, the story of the scapegoat daughter is particularly insightful about the moment of emotional rupture.
Yeah.
The college student confronted her mother after seeing a text from her stepdad expressing a preference for her absence.
Yeah.
Her mother confirmed it, said that having her home messes up routines and that the student was too much like my dad.
Devastating.
Devastating. A confirmation that she is the designated emotional outsider. But her subsequent realization is the key insight here. Her boyfriend wisely told her she should look at this painful truth as a positive, as freeing.
And her internal realization was that she was finally freed from the obligation to make them happy. The expectation of performance was lifted. Anonymity allows the external validation for that realization, the affirmation that she is not the problem, but a victim of a toxic system, something her own family would never, ever grant her.
We've moved from deeply personal trauma secrets that threaten one life to secrets that threaten entire systems. We need a moment to transition, because before we jump into the sexual fantasies, we have to acknowledge the one corner of our source material where the mask is used to articulate vast, systemic, politically combustible secrets.
This transition is jarring by necessity because the source material is inherently explosive. We are moving from secrets that destroy a kitchen table to secrets that threaten the foundation of global finance and power, all expressed under the cover of the anonymous complaint subreddit.
So, we saw an explicit assertion in the Complaint subreddit. It claimed that the secret Trump is really trying to hide in the Epstein files isn't sex, it's money, Russian money. And we must report this impartially as the content cited in the source material.
This is a complex allegation leveraging publicly available data to construct an anonymous argument. The Post cites that after the 1990s bankruptcies, nearly every major U.S. bank blacklisted Trump. The documentation cited to support this includes internal Deutsche Bank compliance reports. FinCEN Suspicious Activity Reports, or SARS, which flag potentially illicit activity to the government, and the Bipartisan Senate Intelligence Report, Volume 5.
So the core of this anonymous allegation is that Deutsche Bank's private wealth division, despite being repeatedly fined for laundering Russian money, kept lending to Trump, effectively acting as a necessary financial life support. The Post highlights documented claims detailing how Trump properties became all-cash laundering hubs.
And specific data was cited to reinforce the claim. Trump Hollywood in Florida having 34% Russian buyers, and the Sunny Isles area being nicknamed Little Moscow. The Post even quotes Eric Trump telling a reporter in 2014, "We don't rely on American banks. We have all the funding we need out of Russia."
Right.
The argument being made is that this financial paper trail linking Russian oligarch money, Deutsche Bank, and anonymous LLC buyers is the doomsday scenario because it destroys the image of the self-made billionaire.
That is heavy. The anonymous poster is using the mask to synthesize disparate public records and create a single, unified narrative that would be professionally dangerous to articulate under their own name.
And this anonymous political space also contains equally raw, emotional complaints about things like pedophilia accusations and the sheer exhaustion with modern media rhetoric. It shows that whether the fear is personal trauma or systemic corruption, the anonymous web is the repository for the unspeakable.
It proves that if the issue is too explosive or dangerous to say in the light, the mask will absorb it, providing an unfiltered outlet for both personal and geopolitical anxiety. That brings us to Section 4, the extreme edge of anonymous desire. This is the most potent expression of the self-expression motive we discussed earlier. This is where fantasies are fulfilled without any real-world risk, allowing for total freedom.
This content, found in sources like Literotica, facilitates a necessary discussion and a very detailed exploration of taboo desires. Cuckolding, cheating, extreme non-monogamy. The writer is fully expressing an aspect of themselves that is too shameful or too threatening to their actual life to ever embody publicly.
Let's start with the classic taboo setup that manages to resolve itself neatly. The professor-student fantasy found in the new semester story. You've got Professor Jackson, 35, happily married to his cute little bookworm wife, Mandy. But he harbors a secret, undeniable love for the alt-girl look.
Right, so the professor is repressed, he's living a safe professional life, but his suppressed desire is for edginess. And the student, Larissa Dow, she's in her 20s, Vietnamese German, is the physical embodiment of that forbidden desire, and she catches on immediately. The narrative details her subtle escalation. First, it's purple bangs after a compliment, then her entire head is dyed vivid purple, then a new septum piercing, and increasingly provocative clothes worn specifically for him.
And the climax is a masterful display of controlled power. It happens during the final exam. Larissa is slowly stripping her hoodie, giving the professor small reveals. She approaches his desk with the hoodie fully removed, wearing a skin-tight lace top, basically lingerie, and whispers a cryptic farewell promise. She did it all for him, exploiting his specific, hidden desire for her physical transformation.
The professor spends the entire summer just consumed by guilt, lust, and the moral dilemma of his infidelity. But the author steps in to provide the ultimate fantasy safety net. When he returns home, his wife Mandy has secretly been hitting the gym. She looks amazing. She turns to him, pulls off her glasses, smiles, and suddenly she is transformed into a slutty succubus who possessed the quiet, prim wife.
The fantasy is transferred. The author allows the professor to fulfill his hidden alt-girl desire entirely within the bounds of his marriage, validating his choice of partner while acknowledging his desire for the forbidden. It's a very safe self-expression.
It is. However, many of these anonymous fantasies explicitly deal with real-world transgression, where the lines are permanently blurred. The emotional stakes are far higher.
Take the reunion surprise we opened with, the threesome under the Florida moon involving the narrator Tim and his longtime engaged friends, Jim and Raina. The source material is incredibly raw because it's a confession of a lived fantasy.
This narrative is Tim's moment of radical self-acceptance. He confesses that he had hidden homosexual fantasies his entire married life, which were suddenly fulfilled by Jim and Raina. The raw details are crucial. He's exposed as a man whore who desires men, and he ends up being the bottom.
And the scene described is aggressive and intimate. Jim pushes his large cock deep into Tim's anus, massaging his prostate, while Raina gets under him, performing oral sex and encouraging Jim with lines like, "There it is, girl, suck 'em dry." The total sexual control exercised by his friends is the necessary component of the fantasy.
And anonymity facilitates this, a lifelong, secret homosexual fantasy fulfilled with his engaged childhood friends. The honesty is painful, exhilarating, and completely dependent on the protective mask.
We see other complex power dynamics in the neighborly threesome deception, involving the male narrator, his neighbor Eloise, who identified as a carpet muncher in college, and her large husband Jeff. The dynamics of sexual submission are key here.
The narrator consistently occupies a submissive or bottom position. After he sleeps with Eloise while Jeff is away at sea, the confrontation when Jeff returns is not one of condemnation, but of acceptance and transformation. Jeff confronts him saying, "You fucked my wife," and then immediately orders him, "Now your pussy is going to replace her pussy? Get up."
Wow.
The narrator complies instantly, eager to please, bending over the sofa in the exact same position Eloise was in the night before. Jeff proceeds to rim and then fuck him aggressively, telling the narrator he was pleased his ass was fine. It's a complex, raw narrative of cuckoldry, verse dynamics, and sexual submission played out for an anonymous audience.
These narratives aren't just about sex, though.
Not at all. They're about power dynamics that cannot be safely explored in a traditional, identifiable relationship. The anonymity allows the individual to safely articulate and perhaps fulfill their deepest needs for control or submission.
But the most profoundly disturbing confession, the one that showcases the emotional and ethical depths that only anonymity can hold, is the story of the friend sleeping with his sister Lydia.
Yeah, this one is. It's a lot. The narrative begins innocently, but ends in profound coercion and trauma. The friend, Mark, is struggling with his sexual orientation due to his strict Asian family environment. He asks his older sister Lydia to kiss him to check his orientation. This spiraled into them having sex.
So Mark felt immense guilt, but then the dynamic inverted.
Completely. Lydia blackmailed him, threatening to tell the family he forced himself on her if he didn't comply with her demands, essentially turning him into her personal sex object. The narrator believes Mark developed a form of Stockholm Syndrome and genuinely fell in love with Lydia, his older sister.
And the narrator of the confession post is absolutely haunted by his own accidental encouragement years earlier, when Mark first confessed the initial kiss.
Right. The narrator replied, "Bro, that's really flaked up, but you should try to find somewhere in your heart to forgive yourself and be happy." The narrator believes those words enabled Mark's subsequent, seriously fucked up, and highly abusive path.
The guilt is crushing. But the anonymous forum becomes the necessary repository for this secret, which is just too massive and ethically shattering to share with anyone identifiable.
And the sources suggest Lydia's need for control stemmed from a history of familial abuse, reminding us that even the most extreme toxic fantasies often have trauma lurking just beneath the surface, driving the behavior.
So we have spent time in the deepest, most shielded corners of the internet. We dove into the secrets that require total anonymity, from the deeply shameful personal trauma to the politically combustible and the radical expressions of explicit desire.
And we connected to psychology. The digital double life confirms that the parts of ourselves we suppress, whether it's benign self-expression, trauma, or genuine malevolence, they need an outlet. Anonymity isn't a hobby. It's a critical psychological pressure release valve.
It allows the lonely, the anxious, the sadistic, and the sexually marginalized to feel seen, to experiment, or to exude control, if only for a moment.
But crucially, we also analyze the cost. While anonymity is a necessary space to disclose and find relief, we establish that constant reliance on it actually fosters loneliness and narcissism. It breeds highly simplistic black and white perspectives, especially in the world of relationship advice where complexity is instantly rejected for the easy verdict.
Which raises a fundamental important question for you, the learner, to consider long after this deep dive is over. We saw the profound, immediate relief that comes from confession under the protection of a digital identity. Is that relief worth the long-term psychological cost of avoiding the genuine, messy, difficult labor of identifiable connection in the real world?
Or, to push that thought even further, in a world that is so quick to judge, condemn, and suffocate authenticity, is anonymity the only safe place left for radical honesty, even if that honesty reveals the darkest truths about human nature?
We'll leave you with that thought. We appreciate you taking this deep dive with us. We'll catch you next time.